Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's Customer Experience Excellence Centre webinar. I'm Tamsin Jenkins, and I manage our Excellence Centre here at KPMG Nunwood, and joining us today to lead our webinar are David Conway and Craig Ryder. David is the founder of the Excellence Centre and author of many of the Centre's reports, including our latest US 2017 analysis. And Craig is a Customer Experience Excellence Director at KPMG Nunwood, a regular contributor to the Centre's publications, and also has had several journal articles published. Welcome, both of you.
Thanks, Tamsin.
Thanks, Tamsin.
The topic for today's webinar is Engineering a Human Touch into a Digital Future. This is based on analysis from our recent Excellence Centre research in the US, where we see many of the US leaders are successfully delivering emotionally meaningful experiences through a digital lens. I'll leave David and Craig to talk more about that, but first, just a few practicalities before we begin. If you've any technical issues throughout the webinar, please just click on the Tech Support button, or there is also a View Alternative Stream button if there are issues with streaming. And also, if you'd like to pose a question at any point to our presenters, then please feel free to do so by clicking on the Ask a Question box. We'll be making time to respond to any questions at the end, and we do welcome questions, so please do submit them whilst the presenters are speaking. I'll now hand over to Craig. Thank you.
Thanks, Tamsin. So we're going to start by posing the question, if human interaction is what drives emotionally meaningful customer experiences, then how do we compete in a digital future? So we're constantly bombarded by messages, whether in the press, whether at conference, that the future looks digital. But in all of the 8 years we've been doing our customer experience research here at KPMG Nunwood, we've always shown that human interaction is usually at the heart of emotionally meaningful customer experience. And it's that meaningful customer experience which is the driving force behind loyalty and behind advocacy. So if the future looks largely digital, then how do brands compete and prosper in what is a fast-changing new reality? So today, in the next 40 minutes, we hope we're going to answer some of those questions for you. So we've got an agenda consisting of 5 items. The first of these items is an overview of what actually is customer experience excellence. We'll then discuss why employee experience is increasingly a key factor in delivering great customer experience. We'll take a look at consistency in execution. We'll then look at how organizations can justify investment. And finally, we'll take a look at some of the criteria for customer experience effectiveness. So for those that are new to our series of webinars, I'll just briefly introduce the Customer Experience Excellence Centre. So it's a truly international think tank now. We've got 8 years of experience under our belt. In each of those years, we've published UK and US studies, but we've now also got Australia, we've got Italy, Slovakia, Czechoslovakia, and Poland. So this really has a truly international scale. It defines best practice. So not only does it gather customer ratings, about 1,500 brands now, but it helps shine a light on what those brands are doing well and what they're doing less well. We do this by using a technique called critical incident, where respondents are asked to describe what has happened, where they report great experience or less than good experience. Anybody can apply for membership, and there's plenty of free resources on there for everyone to use at any time. And by using this resource, we hope you'll be able to improve customer experience in your organizations, sharpen your strategies, design better journeys, understand and master economics, and provide deeper insights of use every day in your organizations. So this year's customer experience study for the US was undertaken in March, and we spoke to over 7,500 US consumers, and they were asked about their experiences with over 250 brands. And for the first time this year, we looked at employee reviews of those organizations as well as customer reviews to get a very holistic view of what the state of play was in the States. All of those brands, 257 in total, covered 10 sectors, which you can see on the right-hand side. So this is a cross-sector view on what works for customers, what brands are doing a great job, and how they're doing a great job. I guess looking at the data at a very high level, what we're seeing is the US starting to pull ahead. So if you look at last year's numbers, 2016 versus 2015 for the UK, the UK did the UK narrowed the gap versus the US. We saw perhaps some businesses pulling back in terms of how they deliver against customer experience. But in 2017, we're seeing the US really pull ahead to an all-time high. What does that mean in practice? Well, on the right-hand side, we can see that if we take a score of 8 as the point at which truly outstanding experience gets delivered, then in the US, we can see 15 brands achieving that. Compare that to the UK, where there's only 1 brand achieving it. And in practice, what does that mean? Well, it means that for many, many Americans, they come across customer experience excellence every day, every week, every month. In the UK, there's only First Direct delivering that. So unless you have a First Direct account, it's unlikely on a national scale you'll experience that outstanding performance that 15 American businesses seem to be doing a good job of delivering. Digging a little further into the data and looking at each of the 10 sectors in general, you can see that in 9 of the 10 sectors, the Americans are ahead and quite impressively ahead. In one sector they're behind, that's the public sector, and in 2 sectors in particular, they are some way ahead. So the logistics sector and the utilities sector are well ahead of their UK counterparts. In fact, they're both 11% ahead of the performance delivered in the UK. Okay, I'm going to hand over now to David Conway, my colleague, who's going to talk about what customer experience is, how we define it, and he's going to cover our 6-pillar model for those that haven't seen it before.
Craig, good afternoon, everybody. So, yes, Craig says we're going to take a quick look at Excelence, and we're going to take a look at the organizations in the US that deliver that. Now, we've got a particular lens this time, which is a true digital lens. What is it organizations are doing to engineer a human touch into the experience that they deliver through their digital applications? So if we move on to the 6 pillars, many of you will know by now that the lens through which we measure and monitor and assess and understand excellence is through the 6 pillars of customer experience. We identified them some 8 years ago. Every year we double-check they're still valid. And this time around we've used the 6 pillars as a lens through which to understand how digital experiences are being delivered. So just very quickly to run through. Personalization. Originally, personalization was very much about using individualized attention to drive an emotional connection. So taking note of the individual circumstances and tailoring the experience around those circumstances. More recently, we've seen that personalization is about the impact that the experience has on the individual and how it leaves them feeling. So do they feel better about themselves? Do they feel valued? Do they feel important? Do they feel equipped? Do they feel in control? It's that residual emotional sense of satisfaction that actually is important about personalization. Now, increasingly, what we're seeing is that personalization is also about shared values. So at a deep emotional level, it's the degree to which individuals are able to see their own personality reflected in the brand personality of the business that they deal with. And in particular, how that's reflected through the digital and technical interactions they have with companies. Integrity, well, we see integrity and trust as being 2 sides of the same coin. I think it's important to note here that something like 90% of all purchases are now subject to social influence. What we see with the leading organizations in the US is that they are very clear that their target audience also has an audience, and if they're going to be successful, they actually need to ensure that they build trust with both. So what's becoming very important to these businesses is their social capital, their reputational capital, and how that's distributed and managed and maintained through the social ecosystem. Expectations, very much about the brand promise and how it's delivered. But what's interesting about this particular piece of research is what's become apparent from the US companies is that the silo-based business model is no longer fit for purpose. It's very difficult to keep pace with escalating and changing customer expectations if you're organized in a very functional way. And what we see is something like 30% of the Forbes top 100, top 500 companies have started to reorganize and restructure themselves around customer need and customer journeys. Resolution, about fixing things when they go wrong. And we talk a lot about John Lewis and Waitrose and their sort of approach to heroic recovery. But social amplification really is the danger here. So most of us will look at reviews before making a purchase, or immediately post a purchase, we will post a review. And actually, when we look at those reviews, we often feel that actually maybe those bad things can happen to us. So fixing problems and making sure customers feel really good about the fix is crucially important. Time and effort, so minimizing effort. We have the urgency of now. So for most of us, we're all time poor. We want things to happen straight away. And we're seeing in the US particularly, these organizations that are the top of our leaderboard, no longer 9 to 5 in terms of social media. This is a 24-hour watch and a 24-hour listen to understand what's happening and what's going on, and with a very immediate reaction. And then finally, empathy. Empathy is about showing that you care. It's about showing that you're prepared to walk in the shoes of your customer, and in so doing create a sense of belonging. And one of the things that's emerged from this particular report is the growth of what we call the sort of the empathic organization, or the listening organization. Organizations that are able to continually put themselves in the shoes of their customers and reflect that understanding back. So the 6 pillars aren't created all equal. They have a different weighting, a different contribution to both loyalty and to advocacy. And unfortunately, when we look at the great companies, they don't necessarily excel at one or two of them. They excel at all of them. So it's important that all of these are focused on to get them right. We can see that on loyalty, personalization and time and effort have a predominant impact on a loyalty score and people's willingness to come back. And in terms of recommendation, well, personalization has a very strong impact. It's how it feels to you as an individual that encourages you then to go and share that experience with other people. Now, you may, in previous webinars, have seen our kind of hierarchy of needs, with thanks to Mr. Maslow. The concept behind this is we see many organizations trying to go straight to the answer, so going straight into sort of surprise and delight type activities, when actually the basic processes aren't successfully delivering what customers need. And it's been based off a lot of analysis from Net Promoter Scores, and we see that when people score between a 0 and a 3, typically the issues are integrity-based. Between 3 and 4, they tend to be resolution or problem-based. 5 and 6, a misstatement of expectations. And then 7+, it is time and effort. 8+ personalization. But to get 10, you've got to show real empathy and that you care. Now, in the digital world, we see those playing out in a very similar way. So integrity is about safety and security. Resolution is about being able to reverse your errors and actually, ensuring that there are meaningful FAQs. And when you need rapid action or you need rapid help, that you're able to go in touch with a human very quickly. And the Amazon Mayday button being a very good example of an organization that's incorporated that into the digital app. Expectations. Well, we expect every interaction to be usable, intuitive, easy, but also increasingly organizations are focusing on how they deliver the brand promise in the in the experience. Time and effort. Most of our research suggests that unless the customer is able to achieve what they want to achieve in a maximum of 3 steps, they become irritated and less enthusiastic about the experience. Also, increasingly, people want to be able to go end-to-end in the digital world. So it's about the rapid achievement of the entire task as opposed to speeding up parts of it. Personalization, well, this is about surprising me with things that are relevant to me as a unique individual, reflecting the fact that we have a history together and improving my sense of self. In terms of empathy, well, it's about sort of human and empathic cues. It's about showing that actually, even in a technology world, there's a sort of a human dimension to it. But increasingly, we see it about being able to solve sort of life problems, those things that maybe are minor irritants, but which technology can actually transform. And in so doing, it's enjoyable for its own sake. So this is our top 10. These are the leading companies in our survey. There's 7,500 people that Craig's talked about. And what's interesting about these 10 is that they are all equally adept in the digital world as they are in the offline world. For those of you who listened to us in the past, you know that USAA is an organisation that has topped our surveys for the last 3 years. It's an organisation that is entirely focused on empathy and being close to its customers and about solving the life problems of those customers. Disney parks, well, long known for what they've been able to do sort of with digital, animatronics, all of the different themes and rides that they create. Respondents this time around talked about the sort of their Mega Plus system, so the use of the Magic Band being able to reduce waiting times, congestion, and improving efficiency. For intercontinental hotels, who've moved into our top 10 for the first time, well, for them it's about behaviour. It's about how their employees interact with their guests. And they have what they call the global service etiquette, which is how they standardise and operationalise outstanding behaviours from their staff. For Amazon, well, again, Amazon past masters really at managing sort of the human dimension in the digital world. Echo, Alexa, Amazon Go. There are a number of different initiatives underway that in turn solve life problems, but do so in a very human way. Southern Company is a utility. So this is an example of an empathic utility, which in UK terms might be something of an oxymoron. But in terms of the US, we see a number of the utilities have really sort of upped their game. And for the Southern Company, it is entirely based on their focus on their employees, making their employees feel part of a wider family and encouraging their employees to go that extra mile for the customer. W Hotels, revolutionising the hotel experience, and they call it WOW. We're going to look at them in a little bit more detail later, but it's what you want whenever you want it is their big, hairy brand promise, and that is quite a promise. Publix, very much about shopping fun, making shopping fun. It's also about teaching customers to sort of unlock their inner chefs and, big focus on education and encouraging customers to try and experiment with the produce that they sell. Chick-fil-A focused on the second mile, so they are very careful about who they recruit, and they look for employees who care about the customer and show it. Costco, there is a phrase in the retail world that retail is detail, and their CEO very publicly talks about every day to be a successful retailer, you've got to get a million things right. And they're about focusing on their people, and they pay significantly more for the quality of people that they use to ensure that they're able to deliver the experience that they want to deliver. And then finally, Wegmans. Again, we've talked about them in the past, very much a theme park of food, but they've moved into the digital world. Their smartphone app allows you to navigate the aisles of their extensive supermarkets, be able to identify produce, and then combine items to suit you in terms of recipes and planning your shopping trip. So let's move on and talk about USAA and what USAA are able to do in terms of excellence in a little bit more detail. So they focus very much on the use of digital to design out effectively life problems, and they are intensely focused on emotional design, so the use of digital to evoke emotions in the customer as well as just completing a task. And in fact, if you look at the report, there's some work being done by Dr. Nicholas Epley at the University of Chicago. And he talks about the mind of the machine, being able to make sure that whatever it is that you interact with technologically has a human dimension to it. And USAA are extremely good at delivering against that. Two examples that we've picked out. The first is EVA is a sort of a form of Siri or Alexa, I guess. It's a voice-activated technology which allows you to conduct your financial affairs without necessarily having to speak to a representative. They were also the first of the American insurers to provide electronic access for those seeking to purchase insurance to their medical records, just to expedite that particular process. So what's interesting about US CEE is that these things aren't done because they are just useful technologies. They are done because they solve an issue. So they focus primarily on members of the US military and their families. And when their customers, or members as they call them, are deployed, it's not always easy to speak to a representative. So EVA is a solution to that problem. But there are three dimensions really that US CEE are very good at in terms of applying technologies. The first is where the customer is emotional and needs some form of help or support. And their application for dealing with a car accident or making a claim is an extremely good example of that, where you're able to rapidly take a photograph of the accident, upload any information about the weather or the conditions, and initiate a claim directly from the telephone. And they commit to having a replacement car at the scene of the accident within an hour. So very much about solving a problem, but very much about ensuring that the customer feels reassured and helped and assisted. The second area is where the customer can be made emotional. So their car purchase app is a good example of that, where it equips the purchaser with information about the sorts of discounts they might negotiate from that dealer, as well as the different aspects of making a car purchase. And then finally, they look at the transactional support, so being able to ensure that they make activities really easy for their customers. And the app that they have for taking a photograph of checks has been a good example of that. Again, each of these is about solving problems for their time-poor customers who actually don't spend a lot of time in the US and often mobilize to different geographies. It's just about making life a little bit simpler for them. So we talked a little bit earlier about the role of employee engagement, and I guess the question is, well, why does employee engagement matter as we move more and more into a digital world? Well, what's interesting, if we look at the top 10 organizations, is that we see that they're not just great for customers, but they're great for employees too. And there's two sort of parts of that, really. One is the sort of the employee experience and how that links into the customer experience. And what we see here is organizations that are very particular about the people that they recruit, people that share their values, who will deliver the right behavior, who want to provide great service and who enjoy and love interacting with other people. But the glue that holds the organization together and actually ensures that the organization consistently delivers is the culture. And the culture is the root for many of these organizations of success. And JetBlue, which Craig will talk about a little bit later, talk about the fact that actually in today's world only 30% of the benefit for a client is through, or customer is through technology. 70% is driven by the culture of the organization. So it is the culture, it's the unwritten rules, the norms, the beliefs that invisibly guide behavior, prioritization, decisions and actions that the organizations take. So putting the customer at the heart of the organization requires businesses to think about the culture. And US CEE, a very good example of an organization that describes their employees as mission-driven, entirely focused on the customer experience. And their culture is anchored at the very top of the organization, where their CEO is hugely customer-focused. So how do we codify this? Well, we've used a model in the past which we've rather grandly called the human equity continuum, which starts to link these different components together. So what we see is that the culture is instrumental in driving the colleague experience. The colleague experience will then determine the type of behaviors that colleagues exhibit. And those types of behaviors then shape the customer experience itself, which in turn will influence the customer's behavior, and as a consequence of that behavior, the business will achieve certain business outcomes. So if we look at this in the context of US CEE and see how the model works for them, then what we see is when we focus on culture, that culture is entirely built around empathy, understanding and knowing customers and being able to reflect that knowledge back to them. And they, systematically recruit people who share those values, but also they recruit from their customer base. So they are extensive users of people's insight to the life of being in the military. Colleague experience, well, USAA described their colleague experience as being inclusive, and actually it's about living your life as a customer, so much publicized. Their recruitment and their induction activities are all about ensuring that their employees learn to live like a customer. So they, eat military rations, they walk around in fatigues, they, go on military training. It's all about really understanding the customer at a deep and profound level so that you can make a emotional connection with them. And to top it up, they have what they call customer surround sound. So they're continually bringing customers into the organization, exposing employees to what customers are saying, thinking, and feeling, so that customers and employees get the chance to interact and share experiences. And then finally, training, so continuous service training, so ensuring that employees stay at the top of their service game. And this creates a behavior and type of behavior where customers are served fabulously well, and where staff willingly go the extra mile and consistently show that they care. That in turn creates a customer experience which is a strong sense of trust. And when you align that with the focus on solving life's problems and making life easier for the customer, then what we see is customer behavior which is exceptionally loyal, so 97.8% retention, and huge levels of recommendation and efficacy, which in turn create significant commercial returns for the business. So last year, 2016, USAA returned about $1.4 billion to its members, and is growing at a compound rate of about 7% per annum. So what we see with many businesses is that each of these is managed separately and independently, and what the great organizations are able to do is to harness them all together so that actually they are all proceeding in the same direction. So my long-term favorite has been USAA, and in terms of brands, they top our survey and they've consistently excelled at each of the 6 pillars. But coming up on the outside now is W Hotels. So W Hotels, or WOW as they call it, they like to play on the W's, themselves whimsical and warm. But actually the W stands for their brand, which is ever, whenever. And that's an extensive brand promise that they seek to deliver upon. So if we think about them, they're focused very much on the younger style-conscious traveller. They are customers that share their values, so being style-conscious and ensuring that you are receiving and experiencing the very latest in terms of themes and technologies. But they start in much the same place as USAA. So if we applied the kind of equity continuum to W Hotels, what we'd see is that their first focus is on the culture. And here it's about using language to shape culture. So they describe housekeepers as stylists, as their staff as talents, and a swimming pool, the wet area, swimming bar as wet deck. Get the sense of W's coming through there. So very much, driven on values, and they describe their values as flirty, insider, and escape. And these values are not just internal values, but they're the brand values too. They shape the experience that customers receive. The colleagues, well, when they start their experience and their life with W Hotels, they are treated as, so they're treated like celebrities. So they have the full model, staying at the hotel, being experienced to the red carpet, being chased by the paparazzi. What's really important is that staff connect emotionally at the very outset of their work with W Hotels with how they will be expected to treat their customers. And so very much about you have to experience it first yourself to know how to create that experience in somebody else. Their behaviors are codified into what they call the secret 7 behaviors. And despite our efforts, unfortunately, they are secret. We haven't been able to identify exactly what those behaviours are. But it's about all being playful with the customers, having fun, and treating customers in a way which makes them feel special. So the customer experience is about the delivery of the brand promise, whatever, whenever. They also look at creating W moments, specific things that will live on in a customer's memory, which are driven by the fact that only W could deliver them. Customer behaviour, well, 80% of customers intend to return, very high levels of recommendation, and with business outcomes that are fantastic. So rapid growth, revenue per work room, and occupancy rates lead the US hotel industry. So one of the questions, I guess, when we look at these great organizations is the quality of their execution and their ability to execute consistently so that every time you have an experience, it feels the same. So if we look at the distribution of companies, so the 250 companies that we identified and measured this time round, we see that it divides really into three camps. On the right-hand side of the chart, at the sort of the bottom right of the S-curve, are those that are the followers, really. They're organizations that have yet to make their customer experiences exceptional. We then have the middle ground, those companies who are beginning to exercise and implement their customer experience strategies. But on the left-hand side is where experience and commercial return begin to combine. And we see this shape of curve in every country where we do this research. What we see is that there's probably a handful of companies, 10 at the most maybe, that are pulling away from the pack. And these are the leaders, these are the organizations that are able to consistently execute and do so in a way that delivers great experiences for their customers. So in terms of organizations that are doing particularly well and execute brilliantly, then Vanguard Group is one of the organizations that performed particularly well in our survey and has done so over the last few years. It is very much about focusing on personalization. That's the area that they feel is crucial for them. And if you think about the role of financial services and when they're important to us, they're important at particular moments in our lives, particular decision-making moments, where we need to think about what we do with our finances. And this has been their area of focus. So Vanguard is the world's largest asset management company, $4 trillion under management. But what they focus down on is identifying those decision-making moments that customers of theirs make and then providing real support and ensuring that their customers make the best possible decision for them. Not for Vanguard, but the best possible decision that the customer can make in terms of their lives. And they practice what they call ethnographic design thinking, which is following customers, deeply understanding customers, and then using that deep understanding to make the experience easy, to structure the experience in a way which is unique to the client and to their experiences, but also ensuring that they are able to start and stop an experience when they want to, so it's a continuous experience. But most importantly, linking all of these digital ways of identifying information and interacting with the organization by ensuring that there is a single human point of contact, someone that the customer can trust and be able to interact with at points of need when the technology really just won't do it. So Vanguard, USAA, Disney, Costco are all great, what we would call listening organizations or empathic organizations. These are organizations that start their customer experience by literally walking a mile in their customers' shoes. It's about really understanding their customers at a deep and profound level, so deep and profound that actually the understanding of customer problems is what drives the digital implementation. So it's not for these organizations about just automating traditional transactions. It's about fixing things that make their customers' lives better. And this requires them to constantly tune into what their customers are saying and act accordingly. So we talked about USAA and surround sound, bringing customers into the organization. But each of these organizations is remarkably adept at understanding how customers feel at each stage of their journey and at each touch point that takes place. Let's move on and just talk a little bit about Disney, so another empathic organisation. Now, what's interesting about Disney, of course, is that this empathy was driven from the top. Walt Disney was well known for walking in his customers' shoes, in this particular case, his little customers. And a number of stories about how he experienced the theme rides and experiences in his theme parks from the vantage point of a child. What did it look like? What did it feel like if a child was going through this? He was also well known for donning a disguise and walking around the park and listening to his customers in a way which allowed him then to go back and reflect what his customers wanted to his management team and make changes. Craig.
Thanks, David. So our next slide is titled, How Do We Justify the Investment? And justifying any investment in customer experience at the C-suite is an ongoing challenge. It's one we come across in many of our clients and many of the people we talk to. The key to this is to set up in such a way that means you can talk about customer experience in the language of the Chief Financial Officer. Customer experience plans need to be economically justified. They need to be described in pound notes rather than just simply general concepts. So how do we do that? Well, for those businesses who've already got to grips with this, we can see significant cost savings being reported at the same time as customer experience improves. So it's important for the CFO, for the C-suite, in fact, to know that improvements in customer experience don't necessarily just mean net cost investment. Those organizations do that because they've got a very clear view on which customer experience elements are valuable. That's both anecdotally and, in fact, analytically. And this combination of analysis and narrative is impossible for any organization to ignore. So how do you achieve this? Well, first of all, you need a diagnostic voice of the customer measurement framework in place. If this is allied to a single transactional view of the customer, then it lends itself to very, very powerful analytics and econometric modeling. All of that means you can start to talk to the organization about what will happen if you implement experience improvement X, or often, even more powerfully, what will happen if you don't spend the money and you start to see your customer base falling away. So in that case, a very powerful revenue and profitability model can be built, which will definitely focus the thoughts of the CFO and the C-suite on how to protect and in fact drive future growth. There are proof points all around as to the power of excellent customer experience. For example, if you look at the chart here, here's just 3 examples which show that if you get customer experience right, then there are very, very strong profitability implications for that. If we take the Fortune 500 group of companies and look at the top 25 customer experience leaders in our data, we can see that the top experience deliverers are achieving double the growth of the largest 25 companies in the Fortune 500. Our middle column looks at the companies in our rankings and has identified the fact that, again, the top 25 CX leading brands are growing their revenues at 7 times the rate of the bottom 25 companies in our ranking. And finally, that same group of top 25 CX leaders have achieved 5 times the EBITDA of those same 25 CX laggards over the course of 1 year. So very, very powerful evidence both here and across academic research in general that getting customer experience right is profitable, sustainable, and a core part of future revenue growth. Our final case study today is JetBlue. David mentioned them earlier. And this is now the best performing airline in all of our US survey. The brand's New York based. It's 2 decades old now. It celebrates its 20th year next year and has been recognized as a customer experience leader for some time. Recent changes have really accelerated their standing such that in this year's study they've moved up 40 places to 23rd, which, as I say, is the best placed airline in the study. At the time they were set up, the legacy carriers were facing unionization and a very disengaged workforce. And from day one, JetBlue have really driven the idea that employee experience, employee engagement is absolutely key to them delivering a great job for the customer. They have something in place called the JetBlue Promise, and this has been enthusiastically embraced by its people. And this really focuses on the word hospitality. So JetBlue have come to realize that customer service was generally just something that happened where customers sought it out and at specific touch points. And what they're trying to do is, and what they've done very successfully in fact, is build the idea amongst their employee base that it's how the customer feels that matters in addition to what they actually experience. And in fact, looking at the customer narratives in our study results this year, we can see this approach has been hugely impactful with customers, hence their impressive rise up the table this year to number 23. So we've told you a lot today about what customer experience is, what components are vital for delivering it. And from our point of view, there are now 4 components, if you like, the criteria for delivering customer experience effectiveness. When this criteria are understood and delivered, then we see this as the pathway to effective, profitable, and sustainable customer experience transformation. So you can see in this chart there are 4 distinct areas. Our first area at the top left is this concept of understanding excellence. It's important organizations know what a good job looks like. And that's not about a working group sitting in a room thinking up what a great experience is. It's about an outside-in view of what the customer really wants and what the customer really values. All of that needs to be allied to a strong understanding of what works in your industry, but also what works beyond your industry and beyond your geography. So understanding what a great job looks like out there globally and aligning that to what your customers value is the first step in delivering great customer experience. Our second step on the bottom left is an economic understanding of what customer experience is. And as we just said, until your business can link data to customer experience, link all of that to the value in pound notes or dollars in terms of what great customer experience will deliver, then it's very, very hard for anybody at the C-suite to sign off experience improvement. So mastering the economics of experience, what it means when you do something and what it means when you don't do something, again, is a key step that successful organizations have mastered in delivering that transformation. Our third component in the top right-hand corner is that of colleague engagement. And again, no matter how good the transformation plan is, and no matter how good we have a handle on the economics of what that will achieve, unless our workforce is engaged and unless their experience of working for the organization is positive, then it's very unlikely to work. Our final element is a focus on execution. And again, once a plan has been agreed, once it's been signed off and the investment set aside, and once employees are on board, it's important to ensure that execution happens right first time and right every time. And at the heart of great execution is a measurement framework analysis in place that allows you to identify exactly where things are going well, exactly where things are going less well, and giving you the ability to react to that as quickly as possible. So to summarize, we've got 4 key criteria that we think are required to drive customer experience excellence. Our next slide illustrates one of the checklists that are printed in the report once you download the full version, which is available from our website. We've not got time to go through that list today, but as I say, in the full report, for each of those 4 components, there's a simple checklist for you to understand where your organizations are in terms of mastering those 4 key criteria. Okay, so that concludes our formal presentation for today, but I'm going to hand over now to Tamsin, who I think has been taking questions during the course of the session.
We have. Thank you very much, David and Craig, for that. We've had quite a few questions coming through during the webinar, so a few to put to you. And if anyone does have any further questions, please feel free to send them through now and we'll try and address them on the call. So one of the questions that has come through is, how do you see the role of artificial intelligence in customer experience, and how best to use artificial intelligence to bring an emotional touch to the digital experience?
Shall I pick that up, Tamsin, and then Craig can add to it in the end? So the emerging model that we see on artificial intelligence is an interesting one, which is not to unleash AI on the unsuspecting public, but to use it internally. So the empowered agent is the sort of description that we hear being used. So organizations like Prudential, for example, have realized that actually what we can do is supercharge the agent's ability to deal with the customer by equipping them with AI. So in that particular case, there are a myriad of different policies and pension plans going back over time, different terms and conditions. There's a whole range of things that you would historically have expected the agent to be able to deal with, but 9 times out of 10 they'd have to go away and find out the answer. By using this type of technology, it supercharges that. It's able to pick up exactly what is required in that particular circumstance, serve it to the agent, so the agent can then interact with the customer. So AI increasingly we're seeing being used alongside a human as opposed to being used on its own.
Excellent, thank you, David. I think there's a few more examples of that within the report as well that might be worth looking at for people. Another question that's come through is around the sort of size of brands that we're looking at, and how can the smaller brands achieve similar success to those premium brands that perhaps have larger budgets?
So from my point of view, Tamsin, I think it's about finding cost-effective ways of listening to your customers. Becoming a listening organisation can happen at many levels, and you need to find a level that gives you the intelligence you need. That can start at a very simple basis, which is go out there, talk to customers, find out exactly what they want. Do that and keep an eye on best practice locally and globally, and you already start to equip yourself with the ability to deliver experience that really matters for customers in a way that you know is important to them. Mm-hmm. So big budgets help, as they always do, but being a listening organisation is not an expensive thing to be at its most basic.
Okay, thank you. And on that note, actually, there's a question through specifically around this listening organisation that we've talked about, which is just what does a listening organisation actually look like in practice?
Well, I guess we'd probably point to US CEE as being a good example of an organisation that really is sensitive at every touch point to what customers are saying, but also measuring how customers feel. So Wayne Peacock, who runs the US CEE member division, describes it as we measure NPS every which way to Sunday. They are constantly looking at the satisfaction that's created at every touch point. They're looking at how customers are left feeling. The leaders of their business are targeted on the positive contribution they make to their customers' lives as opposed to selling products. And it's that sensitivity, it's that, if we understand our customers at a deep level, if we listen to them at every touch point, if we bring them into the organisation, as they do, they continually run sort of customer encounter sessions at all of their offices, then actually we will understand the customer. We will be at a level that allows us to design innovative products. Now they've gone one step further. They've realized that organizationally, if they were structured in functions, it makes customer listening very difficult. And they've organized themselves around groups of customer needs and around customer journeys so that actually they can see at each touch point exactly what's going on. And they don't have the silo-based lens of the customer journey. They see it end to end, and they can listen to experiences end to end, and then amend to improve what they do.
So I think you may have perhaps answered the next question that's just come in with that, which is what is unique about US CEE and how have they managed to stay at the top for so long? And I think that listening organisation probably fits in there.
That's customer intimacy. Mm-hmm. It's been so close to your customers that you are continually reacting and improving what you do in line with their expectations.
Thank you. I think we've time for one last question that's come through, which is how to differentiate customer experience to user experience for an organisation.
So customer experience is the totality of the interactions and experiences you have with an organisation. So it will be any communications, any advertising, any materials. It's the reviews that people make. It's everything that is associated with that business that you are exposed to and forms your opinion, your view of that organisation. Now, user experience is a subset of that. So user experience is very much about the interaction that I have in a specific case. And user experience is really important. And it's, increasingly customers are becoming very judgmental about the experiences that they have through user interfaces and are looking to, both find them enjoyable and, feel that they're being treated as an individual. So it's part of the overall, but it's just one part.
Here's a great example from me personally. I recently ordered a monitor online from a large electrical retailer. My user experience in ordering was fantastic. It was a great website, took me straight to the product, probably took 90 seconds. My user experience in the store, great people, but the monitor wasn't there. So those individual user experiences would have probably rated 9 out of 10, but actually my customer experience, in order for me to achieve my goal, picking up a monitor, was 2 out of 10. I ended up visiting 3 stores in one afternoon. And therefore, whilst user experience is important, as David says, it's getting the customer from the start of their journey to the end of their journey. That really matters, and that is the customer experience.
Excellent. Well, thank you. I think we may just have one more in. Time for one more question just coming in. Thank you for that, Craig. So there's one more question in which is specifically looking at the public sector and whether public sector organisations should adopt a different approach to the Six Pillars model, or do we think it's just as applicable given the different challenges this sector faces?
Well, I'm going to give a shameless plug for a paper that we're about to launch, which looks at the role of the Six Pillars in the public sector. So I think we'll be launching that in the next few weeks, so keep an eye out for it. The reality of it is that the Six Pillars are linked to human psychology, and they are as appropriate in the public sector as they are in the business-to-consumer sector, to the business-to-business sector, to the business-to-business-to-consumer sector. They, at a high level of abstraction, they shape the way in which we think in any form of interaction that we may have. Now, in the public sector, they may play out in slightly different ways, but nonetheless, we still want to treat or be treated by people that we speak to in the public sector or interactions that we have. We want that to feel personalised. Often we want more empathy because there are often social services involved. We also want to be able to, trust the people that we're speaking to and the organisation behind it. So integrity is crucial. We want them to set our expectations and manage those expectations effectively and ensure that they're delivering on the commitments that they've made to the citizen. And I think probably, finally, time and effort. We want to be able to interact and get things done with our local authorities or with any public body in a way which is quick and expedient. So we would see that, yes, there are some nuances, but yeah, we know the wait for the paper.
Excellent, thank you. The Six Pillars are universal and across sector ultimately.
That's exactly right, yeah.
Well, I think we're coming to a close now for the webinar. So David and Craig, thank you very much for your insights today. And for the audience there, if you would like to learn more about the topic, you can download the Excellence Centre report via the Excellence Centre, which is the latest US report that's available. And you can also register for membership there, and then you'll be able to receive the public sector report that David's mentioned as well. There will be a recording of this webinar made available to all who have registered, so that will be out in a couple of days. But just thank you very much for joining us today.